وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our readings of the book معالم الطريق في طلب العلم of Shaykh Sadhan حفظه الله تعالى. We stopped in the discussion of the great ambitions of the ulama of the past, and the Shaykh continues by mentioning some of their examples. He says, for example, Abu al-Wafa ibn Aqil al-Hanbali rahimahullah, Al-Dhahabi mentions about him in the book Ma'rifat al-Qurra al-Kibar that he authored the book Al-Funun, which reached 470 volumes. And this is not impossible, the Shaykh says, because he used to write in this book whatever stuck in his mind from rare and unique insights and benefits, whether that be from what he attended in the class or he read or what he heard from lessons and commentaries. And some of the ulama say that's the biggest book ever written, Kitab al-Funun of Ibn Aqil al-Hanbali rahimahullah. We don't have all of it, we have some of it, but they say this is the biggest book ever written. Wallahu a'lam. And he mentions Zayd bin Hassan al-Kindi. Al-Dhahabi says about him that he recited 10 qira'at at the age of 10. And Al-Dhahabi says, I have not known this to have happened to anyone else at all. And the Shaykh Sadhan says, I have seen some of the young people recite some verses according to more than one recitation of the Quran, means other than Hafs bin Asim. So it's not something strange, nor is it rare. So do not underestimate yourself and seek Allah's help and do not despair. And this shows us again that the people in the past, the level they had of ambition, young and old. Right? For the others, like Ibn al-Jawzi himself mentioned that when he got to the age of 80 or so, that he learned the 10 qira'at, or if I remember correctly, at that age. Whereas others who learned at the young age. So in both ways, someone is old, he has ambition, and someone is young, also he can have ambition. Not to mention, they mentioned the biography, I believe, Hafid Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, that he also, at a young age, about 12 years old, he also knew the different qira'at. So now the Shaykh, the tragedy, he says, is that some of us discourage ourselves and offer these examples, and these examples, I offer them to inspire our ambition. And when a person reads such examples, they realize that they are human, and those ulama, and they can achieve what they did, perhaps even more. And that's the mindset of the believer and the student of knowledge, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you even more. If you make dua to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're sincere in your talab and you work hard. And it's possible. وَمَا كَانَ عَطَاءُ رَبِّكَ مَحْظُورًا. Allah's bounty is not restricted. But the problem may be that some people did the opposite. They say, well, the great Imams have already passed. We're just here for just to follow them, which is true. But at the same time, we have to aspire, because you don't know where you can reach. He says, he's mentioned also about Qarun, the Qari, that this man memorized the Quran to such an extraordinary degree that he used to hold a circle in the Quran. People would recite to him. And it's mentioned in biographies that he was severely deaf. So he would look at the reciter's lips and he would correct his recitation based on that. Can you imagine? And this is Amr Maymun Al-Dhahabi says about him, he used to say, if I knew that I still had a single letter of the Sunnah to learn in Yemen, I would go there. And Imam Dhahabi says this claim indicates the breadth of his knowledge. It means he knew so much, right, of the hadith and the Sunnah. Sa'id ibn Abdul Aziz says, Rahimahullah, I used to sit with Ibn Abi Malik in the mornings, and with Ismail ibn Ubaidullah in the afternoon, and Makhul after Asr. Right, so he says, look, this Imam, all his time is occupied with seeking and acquiring knowledge. So after Fajr or the Fajr time, and then he has one after the Dhuhr time class, and another class at Asr time. And he says a misconception, the Shaykh says, may arise that our time is occupied with necessary matters. Means people are busy with the things that they need to do. However, he says, as I mentioned to you, may Allah protect you, if you were to examine the hours of your day when you're not occupied, you will see that there is time which, if you were to utilize it for seeking and acquiring knowledge, indeed, even if you were to do that half of it, and half is a lot, you will see that you acquire a great deal of knowledge in a short time, and success only comes from Allah. And this is the reality. Many people, they complain they're busy, but that's not true. Right? Because if you're so busy, that means you have no time to do anything else besides work and eat and family, and no one is that busy. Everyone has something of free time. The difference is those who use it and those who don't. Even right now, they did a study. They say about on average, everyone has 2 hours per day where they're absolutely free. They're not doing anything. I'm not talking about eating, sleeping. I'm just talking about average throughout the day, if you add up all the free time, 2 hours. So if someone spends even that, or half of it, 1 hour, just learning, he's going to become very knowledgeable. So what's the problem today is people say they're busy, but it's actually the opposite. You're preoccupied. You're not busy, you've been deprived. You've been preoccupied with things which are not beneficial. Because if knowledge is very important, you will make the time. And the Imams, before we're talking about, it's not like they were just sitting at home. They had multiple responsibilities, families, work, and we saw some of those examples. So this is encouragement to use our time more wisely, and you can obtain both the dunya and the deen, but most importantly, the deen, the focus on the deen. And he says here another example, Nu'aym bin al-Mujmar. He was said about him, he sat with the noble companion Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala for 20 years in a row, becoming one of his closest students. And Abdullah bin Nafi' sat with Imam Malik for 35 years. And he says if you want to know more about what he learned, then go to his biography. 35 years. And so this is what the ulama talk about munazama, someone holding fast to the shaykh or a teacher for the longest, until his death, or as long as they possibly can. Imam Ismail bin Jurjani, he used to write 90 pages every night in fine print, excellent writing, and he was meticulous in his writing, and Imam Dhahabi said he could write Sahih Muslim in a week. So the Shaykh then says now, my brother, the seeker of knowledge, what we have mentioned, we have been granted means and places and times, health and well-being that were denied to many before us and are still denied to many today. So do not be negligent, for you may see some of your peers reach a higher level of knowledge while you are still at the beginning of your pursuit. And this is due after the sincerity to Allah, due to the ambitions and determinations. One of the brothers told me something similar, saying in essence that he knew so-and-so and so-and-so at a young age, one of the young boys, playing football in the streets, and he used to forbid them from playing during the prayer time. Then I saw them later as students of knowledge, possessing a great deal of knowledge. So much so that one of them were to give a talk under the same roof, I would feel like a layman or ignorant in their presence, even though I'm older than him and have been more committed to the path. So the Shaykh says he does not say this out of envy, but out of admiration. In any case, how excellent is what has been narrated from Imam Malik rahimahullah, that knowledge is not inherited, nor is it lineage or social standing, but is rather a divine gift and a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gives to whomsoever He wills from His servants, or words to that meaning. Therefore beware of having low sense of self, and beware of allowing weakness and cowardice to enter your souls. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and strive diligently to utilize every second and minute, and we can in acquiring knowledge, whether through listening, reading, or attending classes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and praise be to Allah, praise be to Allah, are capable of dedicating yourself to that. And so this chapter here, the Shaykh's main emphasis was to raise the ambitions of the student. And then the next chapter is going to talk about the dangers that can also impact the student, which is hasad. But before going there, it's very important for the student of knowledge to have that high ambition. What are you trying to achieve from the classes you're learning? What level you want to reach? What is your intent? It's not merely attendance. Really, you want to gain proficiency so you can become a da'iyah, caller to Islam, benefit the ummah, make difa' of the deen, defend the deen against the people who are saying bad things about it. Not, I'm coming just to attend. So we must change our goalposts to something higher. And you also have to inspire yourself to learn more and more. So if you know something, then you want to learn more. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Right? So for everyone who has knowledge, one more knowledgeable, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim. So ultimately there's no end. We continue to learn as much as we can. There's never enough. But what we should be careful of, as the Shaykh's mentioned, people spending long hours in seeking knowledge, but maybe their path, their learning is not right, or their ambitions are too low, or they have low self-esteem, or they're learning, for example, in a haphazard manner, or they're stopping, going, and cutting classes and studying and restarting again, and these kinds of things that he mentioned in the beginning. Now he turns his attention to a very important chapter, Al-Hasad fi Talab al-Ilm. He says here, envy in the pursuit of knowledge. And this is something which is a plight upon the learner. Indeed, it can be said that it destroys the blessings of knowledge. And the early scholars spoke eloquently at length about this issue. And if this problem takes hold of a student, it corrupts his akhirah, and the more deeply entrenched it is, the greater the harm he suffers. And it disrupts the student's pursuit of knowledge, hindering his memorization, tendency, and comprehension of the information that he learns or he hears. And no society is immune to this problem, but people vary in the degree of involvement to it. So here the Shaykh is going to tell us about dangers of hasad. And between the tulab and even the mashayikh is there, because they're human beings. But the problem is, we're going to see that if someone knows that in the beginning, then his job is just to get rid of it as much as he can, to curb it, instead of allowing it to become bigger and bigger inside of themselves till it ruins the person's dunya and deen. And we're going to see some examples of it. So the Shaykh begins here by telling us some of the evidences against the hasad. And the hasad is described in the Quran, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ, Allah says. And we seek refuge from the evil of the envious one, when they're being envious. Allah says in the Quran, أَمْ يَحْسُدُونَ النَّاسَ عَلَى مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Are you envious of the people do that which Allah has given them of His virtue or His bounty? فَقَدْ آتَيْنَا آلِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ الْكِتَابُ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. And verily we have given the family of Ibrahim the book and wisdom, and we gave them a great leadership or kingship. And it says in the Prophet ﷺ, doesn't a person read the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, not to hasadu, do not be envious of one another? What about the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لا حسد إلا في اثنتين, that there is no envy except for two people, one person of knowledge and one person of wealth, both are using it the right way. So here we can see that a person who's studying, he should know hasad is haram, it's a major sin. But the benefit the Shaykh mentions that, in reality, if you have a share of it, and it's envy, beware of neglecting it or being lenient with it. For it is like a plant that grows when watered, and its influence increases the more the owner neglects it. So it means nobody is going to be 100% free of any form of envy. But whatever you do, you try to get rid of it as much as you can. It says here, otherwise, if you allow it to grow by ignoring it or watering it, then it's going to take hold of you until it ruins you. And the enmity of the envy is more deeply rooted in the soul than the enmity of others. So the poet said, all enmities may be hoped to turn into friendship, except the enmity of one who is your enemy due to envy. It means the one who hates you out of hasad, there's really no hope for that person to change, because hasad is that deeply entrenched. And the poet said, and a pasture and a vegetation may grow in dung-bearing soil, but grudges remain in the soul as they are. Means even soil that's mixed with animal dung can still grow some kind of vegetation. But then the hasad in the soul just stays where it is, doesn't grow nothing. It only destroys. Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said a very powerful statement, that وَلِهَذَا يُقَال, and for those reasons it was said, مَا خَلَى جَسَدٌ مِّنْ حَسَدٍ لَكِنَّ اللَّئِيمَ يُبْدِيهِ وَالْكَرِيمَ يُخْفِيهِ. Even Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that there is no body free of envy. However, the one who is miserable, he makes it apparent, and the one who is honorable hides it. It's a beautiful speech. Majmu' Fatawa and his Risala on Amrad al-Qulub. That's a beautiful statement. مَا خَلَى جَسَدٌ مِّنْ حَسَدٍ. No body is empty or free of hasad. لَكِنَّ اللَّئِيمَ, the one who is miserable, يُبْدِيهِ, he makes it apparent. وَالْكَرِيمَ, the one who is honorable, يُخْفِيهِ, he hides it and tries to get rid of it. So this is the problem, right? When someone has envy and he's allowing it to grow and to fester, then you're going to see he can't even do talab al-ilm because he's so worried about somebody else's achievements, himself is behind. And why is he envious anyways? If Allah gives someone something he didn't give you, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who gives the knowledge. He's the one who gives the bounty. But here the person's worried about why so-and-so beat me, why so-and-so is better, more knowledgeable than me. And this is the problem we find when someone doesn't realize what's happening. Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah said, no society is free from rivalry and envy except for the prophets and messengers. There's no people in the ummah who are free of it except for the prophets and messengers, may peace be upon them. So he says, if the envious person were to reflect a little, he could see that he's objecting to Allah's decree and the qadr of Allah. And when he bestows a blessing upon his servant, this envious person, though he's through his actions and perhaps even through his words, objects to Allah's favor. And this is the statement of the Sha'ir, the poet, where he says, أَلَا قُلَّ لِمَنْ كَانَ لِي حَاسِدًا أَتَدْرِي عَلَى مَنْ أَسَأْتَ أَدَبْ أَسَأْتَ عَلَى اللَّهِ فِي فِعْلِهِ لَأَنَّكَ لَمْ تَرْضَى لِي مَا وَهَبْ. So the poet says, tell the one who is envious of me, do you not realize who are you envious or have bad etiquettes towards? You have bad etiquettes towards Allah in His actions, for He is the one who has been pleased or is pleased to give me this bounty. And this is the reality. The person who's envious is envious of what Allah gave someone else. So the person, you're not envious of me and you and Masakeen, we didn't do anything. It's from Allah, the bounty. So if you're envious of somebody else, you're really angry at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and qadar. Allah's af'al. This is why one of the cures to get rid of it. Instead of being angry, ask Allah who can give you the same. So this is a way to also remind ourselves that there's no point of being envious. And if someone has it, you just try to get rid of it. And the Shaykh will tell us some ways. And he says that this affliction hardens the heart, distances the servant further from the seeking good, If only we could open the door of sincere advice wide and seek counsel from our peers and brothers, we will be spared of this. For those reasons, Al-Ahnaf bin Qais rahimahullah said, reproach is better than resentment. Means to criticize someone, al-itab khayr min hiqd. To tell someone something but they don't like, it's better than harboring bad feelings and malice against them. And this is the reality that he says, the Shaykh, each one of us saw a shortcoming in his brother, especially amongst students of knowledge, and hasten to advise him, pray for him, and refuse to accept insults and slander and backbiting. Many of our prayers will be rectified. So the person is envious, he should get rid of it. And at the same time, if a brother has a fault, then someone else should advise him. And this is why in Islam we know that it's never good to harbor things in your heart against one another, especially with your brothers. Rather, you should, if it's something meaningful, you tell them directly, sincerely, advise them, or to talk about it. And this is why Ibn Hibban, he writes in Rawd al-Uqala, وَمَنْ أَعْتَبَ لَمْ يُذْنِبْ كَمَا أَنَّ مَنْ اغْتَفَرَ لَمْ يُعَاقَبْ وَظَاهِرُ الْعِتَابِ خَيْرٌ مِنْ مَكْتُومٍ حِقْدِ وَرُبَّ عَتَبِ الْأَنْفَعُ مِنْ صَفْحِ. He says, Ibn Hibban, that whoever reproaches or criticizes you, لَمْ يُذْنِبْ, he didn't commit a sin. كَمَا أَنَّ مَنْ اغْتَفَرَ, and whoever pardoned and overlooked, لَمْ يُعَاقَبْ, he's not punished for that. وَظَاهِرُ الْعِتَابِ, to openly criticize someone for something legitimate. خَيْرٌ مِنْ مَكْتُومٍ حِقْدٍ, it's better than hiding something in your heart. So some people, that's the problem that comes as well. Of course, no one's going to say I'm envious of somebody else. But if you see someone who has those signs, the sheikhs and tell us, then you go and take him aside and say, okay, what's this? What's the benefit of that? Especially because the Shaykh will say, between talab al-ilm and between the ulama is there. And sometimes even more severe than even the lay people, because every community people have afat, afflictions or things they struggle with. And so every group has it. For the lay people, it could be this one, and the talab al-ilm, they have theirs. So that's why you have to study what are the afat, what are the afflictions of talab al-ilm. And one of them is hasad of each other, which sometimes it prevents someone from learning because he's just so worried about the achievements of others. He's not learning anything. At the same time, he's hoping to downfall of somebody else. Right? So, astaghfirullah azim, may Allah protect us. And he says here, then the Shaykh, the signs of envious person. And before continuing, what is the definition of envy? Because the ulama, they have more than one definition. That's where you can also see one way to begin. Right? So one of the most common definitions is when somebody is envious, means somebody has the desire or hatred or kind of like dislike towards somebody else for the bounty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving them, with the hope that the blessings are removed from them. Now some of the ulama, they add that, and some they don't. They add that last part. So envying means to hate somebody for a bounty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. So just being disliking them or hating them for the bounty that Allah has given them. And then the ulama add often, and also hoping, desiring that Allah takes it from them. Either to yourself or to somebody else, but that the person doesn't have it. But Shaykh Mu'athaymi, he mentions, and he's of the view of Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, that the envy, what it means by it, is to have the hatred for somebody else for the bounty Allah has given him, even if you don't want Allah to take it from him. Simply hating him for having that is envy. Because Allah gave it and you shouldn't be envious. That's the point. Ask Allah for His bounty. So he says, this is Shaykh Mu'athaymi's view, and he says this is the view of Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah. Just simply hating for someone for the bounty Allah has given them, even if you don't hope it's taken. Because if someone Allah gave them a bounty, you're supposed to ask Allah to bless them, to protect them from not to say, why does He have, I don't. See, this is the point. So even though there's a little difference there, all of it is still envy, and we should stay away from it. Right? It's not a good trait at all. So now the Shaykh talks about the signs, min alamat al-hasid. From alamat al-hasid, from the signs of the envious. And he says that from them is rejoicing in the mistakes of one's companion. And the mistake of one's companion is greater than the mistake of others, because this companion is the one who rivals him for his prominence and competes with him amongst the people. So this companion is the one who disturbed, right, his peace of mind, or whenever his companion errs, his joy becomes increased. So that's the first one. The second one, he says, second sign, to rejoice in the absence of his companion, or in his not being present in the matter in which he disputes or tries to compete in. So you see that when the two companions meet, they share the conversation because each has a share of knowledge. If one of them is absent, the other takes the lead in the gathering and takes the presence over the rest of his companions and rejoices in his companion's absence. Means if both of them are trying to compete in the munaqasha or the discussion, when they're both there, they're sharing. When one is missing, he's dominating. So he likes that. right? Which is bad, right? It's a bad quality. You're supposed to benefit, not supposed to say, I'm the leader of this discussion. The third one he says here is that to be pleased when his companion is slandered or backbitten, and he finds in it comfort, right? Psychologically, comfort in his heart with that. And he doesn't even try to stop the backbiter or slanderer. And he doesn't assist actually, if he doesn't actually assist him in actually backbiting as well. And undoubtedly this is forbidden, as backbiting about an ordinary Muslim is not permissible, let alone a student of knowledge whose benefit exceeds others. And a student of knowledge, his benefits to others is transitive. So that's the third one, being pleased with people talking bad about him, and if not even himself doing it. Fourthly, to speak ill of his companions when asked about him. For a student of knowledge who is new to seeking knowledge, or an ordinary person asking about so-and-so for some matter related to him, might come to the envious student and find in this an opportunity to speak ill of the so-and-so, or to diminish his status and slander him. And this is without doubt similar to the previous point. The fifth one, he feels embarrassed and uncomfortable when a question is directed to someone else, or when his companion is asked to speak in his presence. 2 or 3 companions will be gathered, and one of them is asked to speak or questioned, and the envious person will then feel intense embarrassment, right, and kind of indifference to what he's saying or what he's offering. And this goes back to the idea then the talib ilm who is sincere, talib ilm is not interested in that. In fact, the Sahaba and Salaf, if someone asked them, they turned attention to the next. They didn't want to absolve themselves of taking the answer. Whereas today is the opposite. Someone say, give me the answer, I'll do it. So this is a good way to learn that a student of knowledge is sincere, would hope that someone more qualified or someone else can take his responsibility out of fear of making a mistake or talking about Allah without knowledge. Whereas the person envious, he doesn't like that. He wants to be the one to answer all the questions. And if someone else is doing that, he just belittles it. Number 6, he belittles the benefits of knowledge or knowledge brought by this companion. So the person who is envious of, he belittles his efforts or his output. An envious person might search for a question or answer to a problem, turning pages and volumes without finding the answer. Then his companion finds it, and when he hears that his companion has found it, he downplays its significance. But if someone else found it, he would have prayed for him, praised him, and spoken good length about him. And this is something that happens. Number 7, he would try to find fault with his companion's words when he spoke or criticized his answers. And you will notice that when some people gather in a gathering, a matter is raised and someone answers, those with malice and envy in their hearts will try to find and contrive errors, even fabricate mistakes in this answer, or attempt to distort its meaning or twisting its words, making it appear wrong. And this is very common in today's time with social media. Someone says something, someone else totally misunderstands it because himself is a hasid. Otherwise, if the answer is wrong, he would answer it himself. He would have corrected the brother and fill his ushtud bi azri, fill in the gap, and he made a mistake, help me. But what he does, he's going to just say, distort it, and make worse. He might take the lawazim of his statement and make takfir, tabdi', a tafsir. And this is today's time. Someone says something unclear. It's muhtamal, he just carries the worst possible meaning. Right? The principle of charity, right? See something possible meaning, leave it. He is like, look what he said, this guy is like this. And then what's more interesting is that with today's technology, he doesn't have to even say it. He just makes it up and accuses him if he said it. Before it was someone in the gathering. Today you just put something and say, this guy said this. Astaghfirullah. And people just listen. Number 8, not attributing credit or benefit to him. From a student example, student knowledge might search for a topic, as mentioned earlier, and exert himself in research and investigation. And then this friend or companion, sensing that he was also searching for it, points to him in the location of a book, indicating to him what page to get it. So the envy grows in the heart, and he will try, when mentioning it, not to attribute any credit to that person. So if someone assisted you in finding benefit, and you're trying to hide that. Why? What's the benefit? And if someone helped you, you should be thankful. And you don't thank Allah if you don't thank the people. But today you find somebody, he pretends like he found it by himself. They say, for example, someone benefits you, constantly thank him, say, so-and-so, may Allah reward him, has benefited me. Put aside the pride, the Shaykh says. And Imam Nawawi says, rahimahullah, attributing credit to those who deserve it, right? From barakatul ilm, is that you attribute the fadl ila ahlihi. Right? This is the reality, right? This is how the person is supposed to do it. And this also goes to the idea of the person who prospers in knowledge is like that. And you find the ulama in their books, they always praising one another. For example, Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, if you read his silsila, you find many times he praises so-and-so Shaykh who pointed out this hadith is weak, or he made a mistake in this. From those who are lesser than him in knowledge, and he praises them, makes dua for them. And this is the way the ulama are. When someone benefits them, they're so happy because the interest is in the benefit, not who brought it to you. So some people, they worry about who's telling me the benefit. Why are you worried about that? You should worry about the benefit you got. But some people, it's like, if anyone but him. Right? Or the worst, if you didn't know and someone else knows. Doesn't mean that the other person might know something, you might know something he doesn't know. So you have to work together. Ta'awun is very important. And to add to this, because the Shaykh mentioned these signs, and there are other signs as well, but he's going to speak to Shaykh about, in the next section, the section here, about the cures. But I want to focus more on some of the signs and some examples of it, so it becomes clear to us the danger of hasad. Because if someone is a hasad, envious, and he knows that he's struggling with it, he should take care of it now, as soon as possible, not wait. Because he's going to ruin his seeking knowledge, ruin his akhirah as well, because of sins he's gaining, and perhaps not only will he fall off, he might even ruin someone else's talab ilm as well. So perhaps the envious person is not learning anymore because he's too worried about someone else, and due to that he puts someone else in trial. And we're going to see some examples, and it happened before in the past, brothers and sisters. It happened. The ulama, in their books, those stories. But the key is that to remember that if you're seeking knowledge, your focus is about talab ilm. If someone's above you or progressing, you make dua for them. That's it. Ibn al-Jawzi, he writes, for example, Sayyid al-Khatir, page 84 of the English. He says, contrasted between the scholars of the world and scholars of the hereafter. And he said, I've contemplated on the issue of envy, hasad, amongst the ulama, the scholars, and I noticed that such dreadful feelings originate from the love of the worldly life. Because the scholars of the hereafter, so he's saying the ulama dunya wa ulama al-akhirah. This is Ibn Jawzi, right? The scholar. He said, I look carefully at the hasad between the ulama at his time or before. That if it ever happened, it's based on hubb dunya. And this is, again, we're human beings. So even humans, even the best of them can have some envy at times. But the key is that when this becomes clear, right? Or apparent, versus the one who hides it. So the one who makes apparent, he said here, he's talking about ulama dunya versus ulama al-akhirah. Ulama dunya, he said they're trying to gain, right? The dunya, he says, for the scholars hereafter, they're kind-hearted, they don't envy. As Allah says, وَلَا يَجِدُونَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَاجَةً مِمَّا أُوتُوا. And you will not find that those Sahaba, those who harbor no jealousy in their hearts for whatever the others may have been given. Surah Hashr, ayah 9. That's the description of Sahaba. They don't find in their hearts any kinds of envy, مِمَّا أُوتُوا, that which Allah has blessed them with. So the person who's really sincere, if someone else preceding him or got more knowledge, he's so happy for him. Why? Because he's going to help the ummah. Why not me and not him? And this is important. This is what he says. And he mentioned, Allah says in the Quran as well, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And those who come after, they say, O our Lord, forgive us and our brothers who preceded us in faith, and do not let our hearts contain any resentment or feelings towards them. So we go back to that book. Ibn al-Jawzi talks about this more, and it's a good section to talk about it. Imam Ibn Uthaymeen, he mentions in his Kitab al-Ilm, the English translation, page 119 and 120, and also in his Silsila Liqa Shahri, tape number 19. He says, summary, certainly jealousy is an ugly characteristic, and sadly, it is more prevalent amongst the scholars and the students of knowledge, and amongst the merchants as well. Look at those groups. He mentions the ulama, tulab al-ilm, and tujar, business people. And indeed, anyone who has a trade, then his opponent is jealous of him. So now the Shaykh is showing us the human nature. It's not to do with just because you're studying knowledge and you're free of it. Anybody, he says, who is in a trade, whatever field you're in, your opponent or the person's rival is jealous of him. However, it's more prominent amongst the scholars and student knowledge, and this is sad, particularly since it is more appropriate and befitting for the people of knowledge to be the furthest from jealousy and the nearest to perfection of good manners. And this is why it's an important topic, because, like we said, every group have afat. For the tulab al-ilm mashayikh is this. Doesn't mean it's the only one, but it's one of them. Hence, when you look at the books of seerah, and you find example of the kalam al-aqran, speech of the contemporary periods, one against the other. And so Mustalah al-Hadith, one of the chapters, Kalam al-Aqran, the speech of a contemporary peer against another, when is it accepted, when is it rejected? And the asal is, if it's not done personally, then it's accepted, because it's a jarh, it's a real criticism. Versus someone spoke about someone else out of him being his contemporary, and close in the same city, or next to each other, or same masjid, or same area, then it can be at times not only a pure jarh, it's mixed with it personal issues. And that's why if you go back to the Kitab Ibn Abd Barr, Jami' Bayan Ibn Fadl, he has a whole section on that. Great Imams spoke about the Imams, and they're nothing, they have no real proof except for this. So we excuse them because we understand. But the problem we have to understand, this point is important. If the ulama, some of them fell into it. So we have to be more careful as well. And they were also pardoned because we're humans, they make mistakes. But here's a point. May Allah, he says, Shaykh says, my dear brother, if you see, this is the key, if you see that Allah has blessed one of his servants with something, then strive hard to be like him. This is Shaykh Uthaymeen's advice. If you see someone, Allah has given him something, in this case ilm, that you don't have, then strive to be like him. Do not dislike him, whom Allah has blessed something with. Rather say, Allahumma zidhu min fadlik. Oh Allah, increase him in your bounty. وَأَعْطِينِي أَفْضَلُ مِنْهُ, and give me better than that. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the dua Shaykh said you're supposed to do. As for envy, it doesn't change a thing from the state of the victim. That's the key. It doesn't do nothing. That person's still going to beat you. You're going to just eat your dust. You're going to be behind. What's the benefit? Right? He's just going to precede you. But what it can do, as we'll see, it can lead you to doing something worse. It's major sins, like for example, trying to harm that person, or get rid of them, or come between them and talab. But if you see some progressing, you hate him, had nothing to do with his talab. Right? Because if this person, Allah gave him a favor, you're just sitting there angry for no reason, right? Not benefit anything. So here, Shaykh doesn't benefit effective victim. However, it doesn't change the state of the victim. However, as we have just mentioned, the cause, the corruption, evil, and the 9 dangers, because Shaykh mentioned a lot of the problems, he should reflect over those harms. And to finish, we want to mention some examples of that, because it's good to know that it happened before, to allow us to know how far I can go. Not to say that this is, right, mention of the ulama or the mistakes that happened is something which is praiseworthy or something we enjoy, but rather to see a lesson. For that's what some ulama, they write about it, and they warn us so the person would know. Because the Shaykh's point of this is that if someone is seeking knowledge and he's becoming envious, he should know that now, that this is one of the problems that may come. So this person knows how to cure it, he knows how to deal with it. But if he doesn't know about it, then you might see someone going and seeking knowledge, and suddenly he just disappeared. His whole attention became attacking somebody else, trying to plot against them. To give an example, they mentioned about the kitab Al-Ilmam of Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, Sharh Umdat al-Ahkam. And it's mentioned them in the book Raf'ul al-Isra al-Quda al-Misr of Ibn Hajar, that Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, the great Imam, he wrote this book, and he says, Ibn Hajar, that we read in the handwriting of one of his contemporaries of Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, who's older than him. Well, I'm older than Ibn Hajar. Then when he wrote Sharh al-Ilmam, and it comprised approximately 60 volumes or more. And at that time, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid was Maliki, then he became Shafi'i. Right? So after Ibn Daqiq al-Eid was Maliki, then he became Shafi'i. And he was a mujtahid in both. But he found that there is talab that he was closer to the madhab of Shafi'i than Maliki. So he changed. And this also benefit, the ulama changed madhab. Right? So there's no point of being strict in one madhab. The great imams can change it. But what happened was, the Malikiyya, when they saw this, because that book was in their favor of their madhab, some of them harbor resentment towards him, and they, for him, abandoned the Maliki madhab, and they envied the Shafi'i. So one of them went and he stole the kitab and threw it in the river, and it just until it became lost. And only what remained is what little we have today. Can you imagine, right? This is a big book. They say amongst the biggest that was written. And he has a book bigger than that, but this is amongst the stories they mentioned. Then Ibn Hajar says, commenting, he said, I heard from my teacher, Abu Fadl Ibn Hussein, that the book was 20 volumes, right? And what happened was that some of in his opinion, it wasn't the Maliki, it was the Hanbalis. But the Shaykh said, I don't prefer to mention their name because our teacher wasn't certain. So in any case, it was someone of a different method, and it's not the first time it happened. Stealing books is actually a whole list of ulama whose books were stolen by other ulama, right? Out of envy. Imagine, brothers. And this shows you that if someone doesn't know this, in their own heart, they be thinking that what's happening to them, they don't realize ahead of time. So it's good to know from the story that it happened before something like this, which is something good, but a person should be protecting their heart. And of course, it doesn't mean all the ulama, it's incidents that happen here and there. And one more story to show amongst even the same madhab, because again, we mentioned Malikis against Shafi'is. Amongst the Shafi'is, there's sometimes the problems too, within the madhabs. And this is the story of Imam al-Buwaiti al-Shafi'i and the study circle of Imam al-Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i has many students. So he mentioned Imam Dhahabi in Sirah Alam al-Nubala that when Imam Shafi'i became sick in Egypt, Al-Buwaiti, who was one of his biggest students, in fact, Imam Shafi'i says no one more knowledgeable than him among his students. And that time, Al-Muzani is there, Ibn Abdul Hakim, and others. So there are other ulama who are big in the madhab. So Buwaiti is older, but he's the most knowledgeable. So they disputed who's going to take the halaqah of Imam Shafi'i. So he reached Imam Shafi'i and he said the circle is going to belong to Al-Buwaiti. It's his. So what happened was Ibn Abdul Hakim al-Shafi'i and his companions, they withdrew from it because it was the biggest gathering in the masjid. Okay, this is what I mentioned. So they started to make a plan. So they started talking bad about him. Even Rabi' says others who were close talking bad about him until they reached Ibn Abi Dawood, Hanbali. And also him and others, they raised his affair to the ruler in Egypt. And then he was tested in a mihna about the Quran later and things like this. And he was removed from the lesson, from the halaqah, and he was trialed. And later he died in jail. If you read his story, he died in jail. Right? That's just what happened. And it's also a good qissa about the Quran, how he responded to it. But in any case, before that, it is mentioned that he said Al-Muzani, Harmala, and others, also all of them, they betrayed him. Or they spoke bad about him, even though they're all Shafi'is. And he says that, he said himself, I forgive everyone who spoke bad about me or put me in trial regarding my blood, except for Harmala, Al-Muzani, and others. And another. These three, I don't forgive them. And then he says, Imam al-Dhahabi, wake up, woe to you, ask Allah for forgiveness for the talk or speech of the peers about one another is a strange thing. Even prominent figures have fallen into it. May Allah protect us and have mercy. May Allah have mercy on us. So this is Siyar al-Nubala, volume 12, page 59. So imagine, brothers, if this is the reality amongst the ulama, then it's important for the students to know as a lesson, not to speak about the ulama or say that this is something that they fell into just for the mention. Rather, a lesson to be taken. And this is why when the Shaykh is mentioning this point that we're reading today, that it's a reality that cannot be ignored. So a student knowledge, when they're learning, they should know that in the beginning. But the advice Shaykh Uthaymeen, go to Kitab al-Ilm. And in the next week, inshallah, we'll take a look at some of the cures the Shaykh is going to mention as to how to cure yourself of it. And also other benefits of some of the Salaf, and the positive stories of how some of the Salaf, they got rid of that and they had much respect for those who were their contemporaries. Right? So today we mentioned some, and then next week we'll mention other stories of the other side. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. If anyone has any questions, inshallah. Yes, brother. So when it comes to like benefits a person gets, and the benefit is there, but the source may not be the best, means the person who cited it might not be a person of guidance or innovation or something you're not comfortable sharing, there's no harm in taking the benefit without mentioning that person then. And Shaykh Uthaymeen, he mentions that in Sharh Kitab al-Ilm, I believe, or one of the other books he mentions this, Sharh Kitab Muqaddim Majmu' Imam Nawawi. That someone who's an innovator or misguided who mentions the benefit, you could take the benefit without mentioning his name. Out of fear that mentioning his name might confuse the people, that they may think that person is beneficial. But the benefit still stands. But often you find today's time the benefit has been shared amongst others, so it's not wrong to find a better source for it. That's a safer way. To find someone else who said it, therefore you're free of the blame. Right? But if you did do that, there's no harm in it. So because then the hikmah, the hikmah wisdom is Adalat al-Mu'min. It's the lost property of the believer. But that's how you would do it. You wouldn't just share with the person who's misguided or you're not sure of them, just out of fear that people are going to follow him and they don't know the benefit between a benefit and the one who said it. So that's one way of going about it. But I would say since we can find many other benefits equivalent, or you try to find the ulama who said it from the ulama who are Ahl Sunnah, no problem. This is best. This is best. Wallahu a'lam. Ya Shaykh. So Imam Dhahabi rahimahullah, he finishes saying, wake up. When he mentions the story, he says, wake up, woe to you, and ask your Lord for forgiveness for the talk of the speech of the peers about one another is a strange thing, and even prominent figures have fallen into it. May Allah have mercy on them all. And his Sirah al-Nubala, volume 12, page 59. Yes. So if a person is aspiring to surpass someone ilm and benefit to her, you can benefit the ummah, or you can have, for example, a good legacy. This is not wrong. So the thing about the envy is that, of course, naturally, when we see someone has something we don't have, we want that. But the Shaykh Uthaymeen mentioned the point, make dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, increase that person. So that's one of the cures. And then ask Allah to give you that which is better. And it's not wrong for you to compete. Competition is not envy. Competing. So we mentioned before, the ulama, many of them, they compete with one another. In their own lifetime or those who came. So Imam Dhahabi, even after Ibn Hajar said, I tried to surpass them and I surpassed them. So this is allowed. But what's not allowed is that your intent behind it is what? You're hating him for his bounty that Allah gave him. That's what envy is. You hate that person for what Allah given him. And some ulama along with that, you want it to be taken. That's the envy. Not the one that say, oh Allah, make me better than him, because you want to have more impact in the ummah. So competition is different, because that's why we should be competing in a healthy way. And this is one of the ways we're going to see that when you have the cures of envy, then competition only makes you better, sharpens the sword, but doesn't make you want to put others down or disappear. So we have to differentiate these two. Otherwise, we're trying to all, as Allah says, want to become the muttaqeen imam. Everyone wants to become an imam for the ummah, right? That's the key. That's a good intention. But not to say, I'm going to do that at expense also, at the same time hating someone else's bounty or get rid of him. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. So we have to have a healthy competition. Allahu alam. Yes, brother. So the question was, is it possible for some latter scholars to surpass some of the earlier scholars who were not from the Salaf? It's possible. Anything's possible. But there's bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't say it's restricted, it's not possible. But obviously difficult or rare. And that's why even we could say Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah himself is an example. At his own time, compared to those like came before, like Ibn Daqiq al-Eid was older than him. But Ibn Taymiyyah was more knowledgeable than him. Right? So these are examples of that, but it's possible. That's why at the end of the day, a person's intention is to try to become as great as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can allow you. That's the intention. You seek knowledge to become like Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam al-Albani or more. Not some people, but the problem is some people, they do not aspire anything. You have to aspire more. So this is allowed. But again, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, one more, two more, inshallah. Yes, brother. So this is a good question. Hasad is some of within the actions of the heart, and it can also have other with it as well, in terms of on the tongue and the limbs. But you see that the person harboring his heart, that's the first element. That's what it is. So a person has to understand it. If you go to like the book of Ibn Taymiyyah, Amrad al-Qulub, this is one of them. But now with that leads to backbiting, tail carrying, plotting, other things like this. So now a person, once they know this, they have to get rid of it, because it's not passing thoughts. Hasad is not passing thoughts. Actually, a belief, a feeling, something the person has action in his heart towards someone else, versus somebody who had a bad thought of someone. No, you get rid of it. And Shaykh, we'll talk about next week, some of the things to get rid of it has to do with like making dua for the person, seeking istighfar, understanding where it's coming from. But it's different than someone who has a bad thought and disappears, and someone who has harbor in his heart. It's different. That's why the hasad is, he's burning inside, right, because of the action in his heart. So we're going to see. But again, it also connects to other parts of the person's action. So it's very major sin. It's important to read about it and study it. For some ulama say, like, the first sin ever committed was hasad. Iblis to Adam alayhi salam. Right? So that's how serious it is, right? And again, it also is about ilm too, right? And connect, Adam had the knowledge or the virtue that he didn't have, right? So inshallah, we'll talk about the cures next week. Last one, brother, yes? So that's the thing. If you advise someone for something you see to be the signs of hasad, then you did your job. If they don't accept it, that's on them. But not everyone who advises you is a hasad. And we're going to mention that too. There's a story of that too. In a Sirah also, that some people when they're hasad, we advise them and say, because you're envious. That's what they say. So that's already a sign he's envious. You already give an excuse, make an excuse. He's trying to help you. So ours is just do your job. It's better you tell them the truth, because we said itab, having that clear reproach, for Allah's sake, is better than you having thinking other things about that person, right? Because let's say you did see that, you told the person the truth. If you didn't accept, it's on him. But you're right, if someone made a mistake, it's different between somebody, he made a mistake one time and you didn't, give him a chance to correct himself, but someone continues to make a mistake. So the best way is that if you see something your brother wrong, advise him. Don't worry about the rest. This is the best way to deal with it. But we also don't accuse people of envious. We don't do that. We don't say this person envious. We say, these are not good traits. Try to use hikmah as well and wisdom in doing that. Barakallahu feekum. Subhanakallah bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha